The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 2 years. Maya rolled over in her narrow bed, feeling the familiar ache in her back from the old mattress that had seen better days. Through the thin walls of their small apartment, she could hear her grandmother's labored breathing from the next room. The sound always made her heart clench with worry. Maya quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to make any noise on the creaky wooden floor. She had learned to move like a ghost in the early morning hours, not wanting to disturb her grandmother's precious sleep. The apartment was barely 400 square feet, with peeling paint on the walls and a kitchen so small that only one person could stand in it at a time. But it was home, and it was all they could afford. She tiptoed to the tiny bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. The mirror showed a 19-year-old girl who looked much older than her years. Dark circles under her brown eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights, either working late shifts or worrying about bills. Her long black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the same faded jeans and worn sneakers she had been wearing for months. The kitchen was their next stop. Maya opened the nearly empty refrigerator and stared at its contents. Half a carton of milk that would expire tomorrow, a few eggs, and some leftover rice from 2 days ago. On the counter sat a paper bag with 2 dinner rolls from the bakery, where she sometimes picked up day-old bread for half price. She had bought them yesterday. Spending her last $3. Maya picked up one of the rolls and wrapped it carefully in a napkin. This would be her lunch today. The other roll would be dinner for her grandmother. She made a mental note to stop by the bakery again after work to see if they had any more discounted bread. Every penny counted in their household. Her grandmother had been sick for 3 years now. What started as simple tiredness had turned into something much more serious. The doctor said it was diabetes, but the kind that needed expensive medication and regular checkups. The medical bills kept piling up on their small kitchen table, each one a reminder of how far behind they were falling. Maya had dropped out of college to take care of her grandmother and work full-time. She had dreams once, big dreams of becoming a teacher and helping kids learn, but life had other plans. Now her days were split between 2 jobs that barely paid enough to keep them afloat. Her first job was at Peterson's grocery store, a small family-owned shop 3 blocks from their apartment. She worked there from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., stocking shelves, helping customers, and cleaning. Mr. Peterson was a kind man who sometimes let her take home expired items that couldn't be sold. Those small kindnesses meant the world to Maya. Her second job was cleaning offices downtown. She took 2 buses to get there, spending an hour each way traveling. The night shift ran from 4 p.m. to midnight, and she cleaned everything from bathrooms to conference rooms. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid a little more than minimum wage, and every extra dollar helped. Between the 2 jobs, Maya worked 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Sunday was her only day off, and she spent it taking care of her grandmother, doing laundry and trying to catch up on sleep. She couldn't remember the last time she had done something just for fun. The worst part wasn't the long hours or the physical exhaustion. It was watching her grandmother feel guilty about being sick. Every time Maya came home tired, her grandmother would apologize for being a burden. Maya would always tell her the same thing. "You're not a burden, Grandma. You raised me when nobody else would. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Maya's parents had died in a car accident when she was 7 years old. Her grandmother had taken her in without question, working extra shifts at the diner to provide for them both. Now her grandmother was 68 and could barely walk without help. The roles had reversed, and Maya was determined to be as good to her grandmother as her grandmother had been to her. Money was always tight, but this month was especially difficult. The rent was due in 3 days, and Maya was still $50 short. She had already asked for extra shifts at both jobs, but there weren't any available. The electricity bill was overdue, and she lived in constant fear of coming home to a dark apartment. Maya looked at the stack of medical bills on the table. The numbers seemed to grow bigger every time she looked at them. Her grandmother needed a medication that cost $200 a month, but their insurance only covered half of it. Maya had tried calling the insurance company multiple times, But they always gave her the same answer: "That's not covered under your current plan." Sometimes Maya lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling and wondering how long she could keep this up. She was only 19, but she felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her friends from high school had all gone to college or started careers. She saw their pictures on social media, smiling and carefree, and sometimes she felt a pang of jealousy. But then she would hear her grandmother call her name, and she would remember why she was doing this. The neighborhood they lived in wasn't the safest. Drug dealers worked the corners, and Maya had learned to keep her head down and walk quickly, especially at night. But the rent was cheap, and it was close to the grocery store where she worked. Moving to a better area was a dream that seemed impossible right now. Maya finished getting ready for work and quietly checked on her grandmother. The older woman was still sleeping, her breathing steady but labored. Maya left a note on the bedside table. "Gone to work. Your medicine is on the kitchen counter. Love you." She did this every morning, just in case something happened while she was away. The walk to Peterson's grocery store took 15 minutes. Maya used this time to prepare herself for another long day. She would smile at customers, stock shelves with energy she didn't have, and pretend that everything was fine. She had become an expert at hiding her struggles behind a cheerful face. As she walked, Maya clutched the dinner roll in her pocket. It would have to last her until evening, when she could go home and eat the leftover rice. Her stomach was already growling, but she had learned to ignore hunger. It was just another part of life now. The morning air was crisp, and Maya could see her breath in small puffs. Winter was coming, which meant higher heating bills. She tried not to think about how they would afford to keep warm. One problem at a time, she told herself. Just get through today, then worry about tomorrow. Peterson's grocery store was just opening when Maya arrived. She grabbed her apron from the back room and started her day, ready to face whatever challenges came her way. She had no idea that this particular day would change everything. The morning shift at Peterson's grocery store had been particularly busy. Maya's feet ached from standing for 8 hours straight, and her back protested every time she lifted heavy boxes of canned goods. By 2 p.m., when her shift ended, she was exhausted but grateful to have a short break before heading to her second job. Maya walked slowly toward the downtown area, knowing she had about an hour before she needed to catch the bus to the office building where she worked nights. Her stomach had been growling for hours, reminding her of the dinner roll wrapped in a napkin in her pocket. She had been saving it, trying to make it last as long as possible. The park near the city center was one of Maya's favorite spots during these brief breaks between jobs. It wasn't much to look at, just a few benches around a small fountain, some tired-looking trees, and a patch of grass that had seen better days. But it was quiet, and she could sit for a few minutes without anyone bothering her. Maya found her usual bench, the one closest to the fountain where she could hear the gentle sound of water. She pulled out the dinner roll and unwrapped it carefully. The bread was a day old and a bit stale, but it was food, and she was grateful for it. She broke off a small piece and chewed it slowly, trying to make it last. As she sat there, Maya noticed she wasn't alone in the park. A few other people were scattered around: an elderly woman feeding pigeons, a young mother pushing her baby in a stroller, and a man sitting on a bench across from her. The man caught her attention because he looked so out of place. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair that looked like it had once been neatly styled, but was now messy and unkempt. His clothes were expensive. Maya could tell by the quality of the fabric and the cut of his suit. But everything about him seemed wrong. His dark blue suit was wrinkled and dirty, with stains on the jacket. His white shirt was no longer white, and his tie hung loose around his neck. The man was sitting hunched over, his head in his hands. Even from a distance, Maya could see that something was very wrong. He kept looking around nervously, as if he was lost or scared. She had seen that look before. It was the same expression her grandmother had when she was confused or frightened. Maya continued eating her bread, but she kept glancing at the man. He seemed to be talking to himself, though she couldn't hear what he was saying. After a few minutes, he stood up and started walking toward the fountain. His steps were unsteady, and he swayed slightly as he moved. That's when Maya realized he was in real trouble. The man suddenly stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the fountain. He stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, then slowly made his way to the bench next to where Maya was sitting. He collapsed onto it with a heavy sigh. Up close, Maya could see that he was in bad shape. His face was pale and drawn, with deep lines of exhaustion around his eyes. His hands were shaking, and he kept pressing one hand against his chest as if it hurt. Most telling of all, she could see genuine fear in his eyes, the kind of fear that comes from being truly desperate. "Excuse me," the man said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wondered if you might be able to help me." Maya looked at him more closely. Despite his expensive clothes and well-educated way of speaking, there was something genuine about his distress. She had learned to be careful around strangers, especially in this part of town, but something about this man didn't seem threatening. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, sliding slightly away from him but not getting up from the bench. The man looked embarrassed, as if he was ashamed of what he was about to say. "I know this sounds crazy, but I haven't eaten anything in 2 days. I have a medical condition, and I need to take medication, but I can't take it on an empty stomach. I'm afraid I might pass out." Maya stared at him, confused. "But your clothes? You look like you have money." The man's face crumpled slightly. "I was robbed 3 days ago. They took everything, my wallet, my phone, my identification. I've been trying to get help, but without ID, nobody will listen to me. The police think I'm just another homeless person looking for handouts." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard stories like this before, people who had everything one day and nothing the next. It could happen to anyone, she realized. If she or her grandmother were ever robbed or lost their identification, they would be in the same position. "I tried going to the hospital," the man continued, his voice getting weaker. "But without insurance cards or ID, they said they couldn't help unless it was a real emergency. I tried calling my doctor, but I can't remember his number, and I don't have my phone." Maya looked down at the half-eaten dinner roll in her hands. It was her only food until she got home that evening. Her grandmother would be expecting the other roll for dinner. They had no other food in the house and no money to buy more until Maya got paid on Friday. But as she looked at the man sitting next to her, she saw something that made her heart ache. He reminded her of her grandmother, vulnerable, scared, and in need of help. She thought about all the times strangers had been kind to her and her grandmother, Mr. Peterson giving them expired food, the bus driver who sometimes let her ride for free when she was short on change, the nurse at the clinic who had helped fill out insurance paperwork. "What kind of medication do you need to take?" Maya asked. "Heart medication," the man replied, pulling a small pill bottle from his pocket. "I have the pills, but if I take them without food, I'll get sick. The doctor always told me to eat something first." Maya looked at the pill bottle. It was a legitimate prescription bottle with a pharmacy label, though she couldn't read the name from where she sat. The man's story was starting to seem more believable. She looked at her dinner roll again, then at the man's pale face. Without really thinking about it, Maya broke the bread in half. She kept the smaller piece for herself and held out the larger piece to the man. "Here," she said simply. "Take this." The man's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, no, I couldn't." "You were eating that. I can't take your food." "It's okay," Maya said, pressing the bread into his hands. "I wish I had more to give you, but this is all I have right now." The man looked at the piece of bread in his hands, and Maya was shocked to see tears forming in his eyes. "I can't believe you would do this," he whispered. "You don't even know me." "You're hungry, and I have food," Maya said with a shrug. "It's not complicated." The man ate the bread slowly, as if he wanted to savor every bite. Maya could see some color returning to his face almost immediately. After he finished, he took his medication and sat back against the bench with a deep sigh of relief. "Thank you," he said, looking directly at Maya. "You have no idea what this means to me. You might have just saved my life." Maya felt a warm feeling spread through her chest. She had been so focused on her own problems that she had almost forgotten how good it felt to help someone else. What's your name? She asked. Robert, the man replied. Robert Harrison, and you are? Maya Rodriguez? They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching people walk through the park. Maya felt strangely peaceful, despite the fact that she was still hungry and still had all the same problems she'd had an hour ago. Maya, Robert said finally, I want you to know that what you did today, sharing your food with a stranger, that's not something everyone would do. You have a good heart. Maya smiled. My grandmother always taught me that we should help each other when we can. She says that's what makes us human. Robert nodded slowly. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She is, Maya agreed, thinking about the woman waiting for her at home. She's the strongest person I know. Robert reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was crumpled and dirty, but Maya could see it was made of expensive paper. I want you to have this, he said, just in case you ever need anything. Maya took the card and glanced at it quickly before putting it in her pocket. She was more concerned about getting to work on time than reading business cards. I should probably get going, she said, standing up from the bench. I have to catch a bus to my other job. Robert stood up too, looking much steadier than he had earlier. Thank you again, Maya. I won't forget what you did for me today. As Maya walked away, she felt lighter somehow, despite being hungry and tired. She had no idea that the simple act of sharing her bread would change her life forever. Maya hurried toward the bus stop, her stomach still growling from eating only half of her dinner roll. She kept thinking about Robert and hoped he would be okay. There had been something about him that didn't quite add up, but she couldn't put her finger on what it was. His expensive clothes, his educated way of speaking, and the genuine fear in his eyes had created a puzzle she couldn't solve. The bus was late, as usual. Maya checked her phone and realized she might be cutting it close for her evening shift. She couldn't afford to be late. She needed this job too much. As she waited, she pulled out the crumpled business card Robert had given her. Under the streetlight, she could make out the words Robert Harrison in elegant lettering, but the rest was too dirty to read clearly. During the long bus ride to downtown, Maya found herself wondering about Robert's story. How does someone who clearly has money end up robbed and alone in a park? She had seen homeless people before, but Robert was different. Even in his disheveled state, he carried himself like someone who was used to being in control. His hands, though dirty, were soft, not the rough, calloused hands of someone who did manual labor. Maya shook her head, trying to focus on her own problems. She had spent her lunch money on helping a stranger, which meant she would have to work her entire night shift on an empty stomach. But somehow she didn't regret it. The look of relief on Robert's face when he ate that bread had been worth her own hunger. The office building where Maya worked at night was a tall glass structure in the heart of the business district. She had been cleaning there for over a year, but she still felt out of place among the marble floors and expensive artwork. During the day, this building was filled with people in suits making important decisions. At night, it belonged to people like her, the cleaners, security guards, and maintenance workers who kept everything running behind the scenes. Maya's supervisor, Mrs. Chun, was waiting for her when she arrived. You're cutting it close tonight? She said, but her tone was more concerned than angry. Mrs. Chun had always been kind to Maya, understanding that she was juggling 2 jobs and family responsibilities. Sorry, Mrs. Chun, the bus was late again, Maya explained, grabbing her cleaning supplies from the storage room. How's your grandmother doing? Mrs. Chun asked. She had met Maya's grandmother once when she had to bring her to work during a medical emergency, and she had been asking about her ever since. She's hanging in there, Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The doctor says she's stable, but the medication is expensive. Mrs. Chun nodded sympathetically. If you ever need extra hours, just let me know. I know how hard it is to make ends meet. Maya started her cleaning routine on the 15th floor, working her way down through the building. Each floor had its own personality. The law firm on the 20th floor was always pristine, with important-looking documents stacked neatly on every desk. The marketing company on the 18th floor was more casual, with colorful artwork and modern furniture. The accounting firm on the 15th floor was all business, With rows of identical desks and filing cabinets. As Maya cleaned, she thought about Robert. Something about his story bothered her, but she couldn't figure out what. He had said he was robbed 3 days ago, but his clothes, while dirty, didn't look like they had been worn for 3 days straight. And his shoes, Maya had noticed they were expensive leather shoes that still looked relatively new. Around 8 p.m., Maya took her break in the building's cafeteria. She bought a small bag of chips from the vending machine with the few coins she had left. It wasn't much, but it would help quiet her growling stomach. As she ate, she pulled out Robert's business card again and tried to read it under the better lighting. Robert Harrison, she read aloud. Below his name was a title that made her pause. Chief Executive Officer. The company name was partially obscured by a stain, but she could make out Harrison Holdings. At the bottom was a phone number and an address in the most expensive part of the city. Maya stared at the card, feeling confused. A CEO of a company would have money, credit cards, and people who knew him. How could someone like that end up homeless? For 3 days? She thought about asking Mrs. Chun if she could use the office computer to look up the company, but she decided against it. It wasn't really her business, and she had work to do. The rest of her shift passed slowly. Maya's stomach had settled into a constant, dull ache that she tried to ignore. She found herself thinking about Robert more often than she should have. There was something about his eyes that had stayed with her. They held a depth of sadness. An experience that seemed to go beyond just being robbed. At 10 p.m., Maya was cleaning the executive offices on the 22nd floor when she overheard 2 security guards talking in the hallway. "Did you hear about that rich guy who's been living on the streets for the past few days?" one of them said. Maya froze, her cleaning cloth halfway across a desk. "Yeah, I heard something about that," the other guard replied. "Apparently he's some kind of millionaire who's been pretending to be homeless. Some kind of social experiment or something. That's crazy. I heard he's been sleeping in parks and asking for handouts. Can you imagine choosing to live like that when you don't have to?" Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Could they be talking about Robert? The timing seemed too coincidental. She wanted to ask the guards more questions, but she couldn't risk drawing attention to herself. Instead, she continued cleaning while straining to hear more of their conversation. "I don't get it," the first guard said. "If I had that kind of money, I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere, not sleeping on park benches." "My wife thinks it's some kind of publicity stunt," the second guard replied. "Rich people do weird things for attention." The guards moved away, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. If Robert was really wealthy and choosing to live on the streets, why would he do that? And why had he seemed so genuinely desperate when she met him? Maya finished her shift at midnight, her mind racing with questions. The bus ride home gave her time to think, and she found herself coming up with more questions than answers. If, Robert was conducting some kind of experiment, did that make her act of kindness less meaningful? Had she been tricked into feeling sorry for someone who didn't really need help? But then she remembered the look in Robert's eyes when she offered him the bread. That gratitude and relief had been real, she was sure of it. Whatever Robert's true circumstances were, he had been genuinely hungry and grateful for her help. When Maya got home, she found her grandmother sleeping peacefully in her bed. The older woman had left a note on the kitchen table. "Thank you for the bread, mi amor. You work too hard for an old woman like me." Maya smiled sadly as she read the note. Her grandmother had no idea that Maya had given away half of her own food to a stranger. She looked in the refrigerator and found that her grandmother had saved half of her dinner roll for Maya, even when they had almost nothing. Her grandmother was still trying to take care of her. Maya ate the small piece of bread and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. She kept thinking about Robert and the business card tucked in her jacket pocket. Part of her was curious enough to want to look up his company online, but another part of her felt like it would be wrong to investigate him. Over the next few days, Maya found herself thinking about Robert often. She walked through the park during her lunch breaks, half hoping to see him again, but he never appeared. She wondered if he had figured out how to get help, or if he had given up his experiment and returned to his normal life. The business card remained in her jacket pocket, A reminder of that strange encounter. Maya had almost thrown it away several times, but something always stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was hope that someday she might understand what had really happened that day in the park. A week passed. Then 2 weeks. Maya's routine continued as always: work, worry about money, take care of her grandmother, and try to get enough sleep to do it all again the next day. But something had changed in her. The encounter with Robert had reminded her that there were still good people in the world, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could make a real difference. She didn't know that Robert had been looking for her, or that their paths would cross again very soon. She didn't know that the simple act of sharing her bread would soon change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. For now, she was just grateful that she had been able to help someone in need, even if she still didn't understand who that someone really was. 3 weeks had passed since Maya's encounter with Robert in the park. Life had gotten harder, not easier. Her grandmother's condition had taken a turn for the worse, and the medical bills were piling up faster than Maya could handle. She had been working extra shifts whenever possible, but it still wasn't enough. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Maya was getting ready for work. It was the hospital, and Maya's heart sank as soon as she heard the serious tone in the nurse's voice. "Miss Rodriguez, we need you to come in right away. Your grandmother was brought in by ambulance about an hour ago. She's stable, but she needs immediate medical attention." Maya's hands started shaking as she grabbed her jacket and keys. She had left her grandmother sleeping peacefully just an hour earlier. How could things change so quickly? The bus ride to the hospital felt like it took forever, and Maya found herself praying to anyone who might be listening. She found her grandmother in the emergency room, looking smaller and more fragile than Maya had ever seen her. The older woman was conscious but weak, with tubes and wires attached to her arms. When she saw Maya, she tried to smile. "I'm sorry, mi amor," her grandmother whispered. "I didn't want to worry you. I felt dizzy this morning after you left, and Mrs. Patterson from next door called the ambulance." Maya took her grandmother's hand, trying not to cry. "Don't apologize. You did nothing wrong. I'm just glad Mrs. Patterson was there." The doctor who came to speak with Maya was kind but direct. Her grandmother's diabetes had gotten worse, and she needed to be hospitalized for at least a week. They would need to adjust her medications and monitor her closely, but the worst part was yet to come. "The treatment your grandmother needs isn't fully covered by her insurance," the doctor explained. "We're looking at about $15,000 in medical costs, and that's just for this hospitalization. She needs ongoing care after that." Maya felt the world spinning around her. $15,000 might as well have been 15 million. She made barely enough to cover their basic expenses. There was no way she could come up with that kind of money. "What happens if I can't pay?" Maya asked, though she was afraid. To hear the answer, the doctor's expression was sympathetic. "We'll do everything we can to help, but the hospital has policies. We can set up a payment plan, but without insurance coverage, it's going to be very difficult." Maya spent the rest of the day at the hospital, holding her grandmother's hand and trying to figure out what to do. She called both of her jobs too, explained the situation, and thankfully both Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Chun were understanding. They told her to take care of her family first and worry about work later, but Maya knew she couldn't take much time off. Every hour she wasn't working was money they desperately needed. She also knew that even if she worked every available hour, she would never make enough to pay for her grandmother's medical care. That evening, Maya sat in her empty apartment, staring at the stack of bills on the kitchen table. The rent was due in 2 days, and she was still short. The electricity bill was past due, and she had received a final notice. Now, on top of everything else, there was the hospital bill that would destroy any chance they had of getting back on their feet. Maya felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. She had no other family, no savings, and no one to turn to for help. She had always been the strong one, the one who took care of everyone else. But now she didn't know what to do. She thought about Robert and wondered what had happened to him. Had he figured out how to get help? Had he returned to his normal life? She pulled his business card from her jacket pocket and looked at it for the 100th time. The elegant lettering seemed to mock her current situation out of desperation. And curiosity, Maya decided to look up Robert's company online. She used her phone to search for Harrison Holdings, and what she found made her drop the phone in shock. The first search result was a business website with Robert's photo prominently displayed. But this wasn't the disheveled, frightened man she had met in the park. This was a confident, well-dressed businessman in an expensive suit. The website identified him as Robert Harrison, CEO and founder of Harrison Holdings, a company worth over $200 million. Maya stared at the screen, her mind racing. She clicked on more links and found articles about Robert in business magazines, photos of him at charity events, and news stories about his company's success. One article was particularly interesting. It was about Robert's charitable foundation and his commitment to helping people in poverty. Local businessman Robert Harrison has dedicated his life to understanding and fighting poverty, the article read. His foundation has donated millions to homeless shelters, food banks, and medical assistance programs. Harrison believes that true charity comes from understanding the struggles of those you're trying to help. Maya felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite identify. Confusion, anger, and something that might have been hope all swirled together in her chest. Had Robert been lying to her? Had the whole thing been some kind of test or experiment? She found more articles that painted a clearer picture. Robert had apparently been conducting what he called immersion research, spending time living as a homeless person to better understand the challenges faced by people in poverty. Several articles mentioned that he had been doing this for years, sometimes spending weeks at a time living on the streets. One article quoted Robert directly, "You can't truly help people if you don't understand their struggles. I've learned more about poverty by experiencing it firsthand than I ever could have learned from books or reports." Maya put her phone down and tried to process what she had learned. The man she had helped in the park wasn't just wealthy, he was incredibly wealthy. And he had been choosing to live on the streets as part of some kind of research project. But as she thought about it more, Maya realized something important. Regardless of Robert's true circumstances, he had been genuinely hungry that day. He had been genuinely grateful for her help. And she had chosen to help him not because of who he was, but because he was another human being in need. Still, the knowledge that Robert had resources while she had none made her feel frustrated. Here she was, facing an impossible financial crisis, while the man she had helped could probably solve her problems with a phone call. Maya looked at Robert's business card again. Should she call him? Would it be wrong to ask for help? She had given him her bread when she thought he was homeless and desperate. Now that she knew he was wealthy, did that change anything? She thought about her grandmother lying in the hospital bed, weak and scared. She thought about the bills piling up on the kitchen table. She thought about the fear of losing their apartment, their electricity, and their ability to pay for the medical care her grandmother needed. Maya had never asked anyone for help before. She had always been independent, always found a way to handle things on her own. But this was bigger than anything she had faced before. This was her grandmother's life. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on Robert's business card. It rang several times before going to voicemail. Maya heard Robert's voice, the same voice from the park, but more confident and professional. "You've reached Robert Harrison. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." Maya's throat felt dry. She had no idea what to say. "Hi, Mr. Harrison. This is Maya Rodriguez. We met in the park a few weeks ago. I was the one who gave you the bread. I know who you are now, and I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm in a really bad situation and I don't know what else to do. My grandmother is in the hospital and I can't afford her medical bills. I don't usually ask for help, but I'm desperate. Please call me back if you can." After she hung up, Maya felt a mixture of shame and relief. She had swallowed her pride and asked for help, something she had never done before. Now all she could do was wait and hope that Robert would remember her and be willing to help. She spent the rest of the evening at the hospital with her grandmother, holding her hand and trying to stay positive. She didn't tell her grandmother about the phone call, there was no point in giving her false hope. But deep down, Maya found herself praying that Robert would call back as she sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair. Watching her grandmother sleep, Maya couldn't help but think about how strange life could be. 3 weeks ago, she had shared her last piece of bread with a stranger, never imagining that the stranger was one of the wealthiest people in the city. Now she was hoping that same stranger would remember her kindness and help her when she needed it most. Maya didn't know if Robert would call back. She didn't know if he would be willing to help. But for the first time in weeks, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the kindness she had shown to a stranger would come back to her when she needed it most. Maya barely slept that night. She kept checking her phone, hoping for a call back from Robert, but it remained silent. By morning, she was starting to regret leaving that voicemail. What if he thought she was trying to take advantage of him? What if he didn't even remember her? She was getting ready to go to the hospital when she heard footsteps outside her apartment door. Maya lived in a building where unexpected visitors usually meant bad news: debt collectors, landlords demanding rent, or neighbors with complaints. She looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in expensive standing in her hallway. Maya's heart sank. Were these debt collectors? Had the hospital already sent someone to collect money she didn't have? She considered not answering, but one of the men knocked gently on the door. "Miss Rodriguez? My name is James, and I work for Robert Harrison. He asked me to speak with you." Maya opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock in place. Through the small gap, she could see that one of the men was middle-aged with kind eyes and a warm smile. The other was younger, holding a tablet and looking very professional. "Mr. Harrison received your message," James continued. "He's downstairs in his car and would like to speak with you if you're willing." Maya felt her pulse quicken. Robert had actually come to see her? She unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. "He's really here?" James nodded. "He's been looking for you for weeks, actually. He wanted to thank you properly for what you did. When he got your message last night, he dropped everything to come find you." Maya grabbed her jacket and keys, her hands shaking slightly. As they walked down the stairs, James explained that Robert had been trying to locate her ever since their meeting in the park. He had gone back to the park every day for a week, hoping to see her again. "He described you to several people in the area," James said. "He was quite determined to find you." Outside the building, Maya saw a black luxury car parked at the curb. Through the tinted windows, she could see a figure in the back seat. James opened the door for her, and Maya found herself face to face with Robert. He looked completely different from the man she had met in the park. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit was immaculate, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. But when he smiled at her, Maya saw the same warmth and kindness in his eyes that she remembered from their first meeting. "Maya," Robert said, his voice filled with genuine emotion, "I'm so glad to see you again. Please sit down." Maya slid into the car, feeling overwhelmed by the luxury around her. The leather seats were softer than any furniture she had ever touched, and the car was bigger inside than her entire living room. "I got your message about your grandmother," Robert continued. "I'm so sorry to hear about her condition. How is she doing?" Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. "She's stable, but the doctors say she needs expensive treatment. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it." Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. "Maya, I need to explain something to you. When we met in the park, I wasn't being completely honest about who I was." "I know," Maya said quietly. "I looked you up online." "I know about your company and your foundation," Robert nodded. "Then you know that I chose to be on the streets that day. It wasn't because I was truly homeless or robbed. It was part of research I've been doing for years." Maya felt a flash of anger. "So you were lying to me? You made me feel sorry for you when you didn't really need help?" "No," Robert said quickly. "That's not what happened at all. Let me explain." He told Maya about his foundation and his belief that wealthy people couldn't truly help those in poverty without understanding their struggles. For the past 5 years, he had been spending time living on the streets, learning what it was really like to be hungry, cold, and ignored by society. That day in the park, I had been living as a homeless person for 4 days, Robert explained. I hadn't eaten in 2 days, and I was genuinely hungry and desperate. My medication was real, and I really needed food to take it safely. Maya listened. As Robert described the experience of being invisible to most people, of having his requests for help ignored or dismissed. In 4 days, you were the only person who showed me genuine kindness, he said. Everyone else either ignored me or assumed I was lying. But you had money, Maya said. You could have bought food any time you wanted. That's the point, Robert replied. I could have ended the experiment at any time. But the people I'm trying to help don't have that choice. They're truly stuck in poverty, just like you are. Robert reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Maya, I've been researching your situation since I found out who you were. I know about your grandmother's medical bills, your 2 jobs, and the financial pressure you're under. I know you dropped out of college to take care of your family. Maya felt uncomfortable knowing that Robert had been investigating her life. Why would you do that? Because I wanted to understand the person who showed me such kindness, Robert said. I wanted to know what kind of life you were living, what challenges you were facing, and what I found amazed me. He opened the folder and showed Maya some papers. You work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. You've never been late to either job. You've never asked for help from government assistance programs, even though you qualify for them. You've sacrificed everything to take care of your grandmother. Maya looked at the papers, feeling exposed and vulnerable. I just do what I have to do. That's exactly what I mean, Robert said. You don't see yourself as special, but you are. You're exactly the kind of person my foundation was created to help. Robert explained that his foundation had been looking for someone to feature in their next campaign about poverty and kindness. They wanted to tell the story of someone who maintained their humanity and compassion even while struggling with their own challenges. I want to offer you something, Robert said. But first, I want you to know that this isn't charity. This is an investment in the kind of person you are. Maya felt skeptical. What kind of investment? Robert outlined his proposal. First, he wanted to pay for her grandmother's medical care, both the current hospital bills and all future treatment. Second, he wanted to offer Maya a full scholarship to return to college and pursue her dream of becoming a teacher. Third, he wanted to hire her to work part-time at his foundation while she attended school. The foundation job would pay more than your 2 current jobs combined, Robert explained. And you'd be helping other people in situations similar to yours. Maya stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. Why would you do all this? For me? Because 3 weeks ago you shared your last piece of bread with a stranger, Robert said simply. You didn't know who I was or whether I deserved your help. You just saw someone who was hungry and you chose to help, even though it meant going hungry yourself. Maya felt tears streaming down her face. I don't understand. I just gave you some bread? You gave me much more than that, Robert replied. You reminded me why I started this foundation in the first place. You showed me that kindness and compassion still exist, even in the darkest circumstances. Robert reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a check. Maya looked at it and gasped. It was made out to her for $50,000. This is to get you started, Robert said. It will cover your grandmother's medical bills, your rent, and your living expenses while you get back on your feet. But this is just the beginning. Maya looked at the check, then at Robert, then back at the check. I can't take this. It's too much. Maya, you changed my life with a piece of bread, Robert said. Let me change yours in return. Over the next hour, Robert explained all the details of his offer. The scholarship would cover tuition, books, and living expenses at any university she chose. The foundation job would be flexible around her class schedule, and her grandmother would have access to the best medical care available, all expenses paid. There's one more thing, Robert said as their conversation was ending. I want you to consider being the face of our foundation's new campaign. We want to tell your story, show people that kindness matters and that anyone can make a difference. Maya thought about all the people struggling like she had been, all the people who felt invisible and forgotten. If it helps other people, then… Yes, I'll do it, Robert smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. As Maya got out of the car, she felt like she was in a dream. In the span of an hour, her entire life had changed. She was holding a check that would solve all her immediate problems, with the promise of even more help to come. But as she walked back to her apartment, Maya realized that the most important thing hadn't changed. She was still the same person who had shared her bread with a stranger. She still believed in helping others and treating people with kindness and respect. The difference was that now she would have the resources to help others, the way Robert had helped her. She could pay forward the kindness she had received, multiplying it and spreading it to more people who needed it. Maya looked up at the sky and smiled. Her grandmother was going to be okay. She was going to finish college and become a teacher. And she was going to spend the rest of her life helping others, just like Robert had helped her.